Hello everybody! Hello, my name is Paul. Welcome to the ShareWarehouse. Welcome one and all. I want to take you guys way back. We're way back. This is like 1990 or 1991, a little DOS game called Pharaoh's Tomb. Now, Pharaoh's Tomb was kind of like a proto-Commander Keen, and we'll get into the history in a second, but first, our story. You are Nevada Smith, a research assistant to a professor of archaeology at a major university. For years now, you have studied in the hopes that the professor would include you in one of his famous treasure hunts, but it is not to be. Once again, the professor is planning to leave you here to do more research as he goes in search of the secret Pharaoh's Tomb deep inside one of the great pyramids of Egypt. It wouldn't be so bad except you were the one who discovered it. Looking up from another dusty old book in the library, you decide you're not just going to take it anymore, slamming the book shut. You know it must be done. You sneak into the professor's office, avoiding the campus police, and take the ancient map of the pyramid, showing the location of the tomb. Rushing back to your apartment, you gather a few items and throw them into a worn-out suitcase and rush into the airport to catch the next plane. You will have your moment of glory this time, and the professor will get what he deserves. Smiling to yourself, you fall asleep on the bumpy airplane, bound for adventure. You gotta love the old stories in these DOS games, because it took a lot of imagination to really kind of put yourself in it, because look at it. This is our Egyptian adventure. So that up there, that's our little fella Nevada Smith, which is an obvious sort of dig at Indiana Jones, who I imagine to be his teacher he was talking about. So this is sort of Indiana Jones's understudy. But he got the drop on him this time. So he got the map to these ancient pyramids, and you're the one who gotta get out of there and get it. Now, this is probably, this I think is actually my first DOS game ever. My dad had this, he was working at this large company, and they gave him one of the very first laptops, quote unquote, personal computers or portable computers, and it was the size of like a steamer trunk. It weighed 50 pounds. It was crazy. It had the guts of a full tower PC, and it had this little itty bitty screen in it, which was green and black, and it had the keyboard that disconnected from the front. It didn't have a mouse, but it did have two disk drives, I think. So that's how I learned how to play Pharaoh's Tomb, in two-color green and black. It was wonderful. And then I learned the game had color, and then I learned the game had sounds. Holy crap. It was incredible. Now this game was made by a fellow named George Broussard, and we'll get into more of him in a second, but essentially he started this company called MicroFX, which he made this game and a few other small ones, which maybe we'll talk about in the warehouse later on. I'm sure they're buried in there somewhere. But eventually he partnered with Scott Miller from Apogee and 3D Realms and all that. So he and George Broussard are co-owners of Apogee. So this is where this became along. And since this is sort of a later version of the game, I think at the end it has the, call Apogee to order the game and so on and so forth. The normal Apogee model, shareware, etc., etc., etc. So this is the freeware release from March 2009. And I gotta read you the letter that came with it, because there's actually a correspondence from the tech support of Apogee buried within the game. Well, sort of in the game's file folder. So I have to read this to you, because this can give you more information about the game than I could ever give you. Here we go. This game was deleted from Apogee's product line quite some time ago and has been re-released as freeware in March of 2009. Back in the earliest days of Apogee in the 1980s, George Broussard wasn't always involved with the company. He and Scott Miller were always friends, but in the 80s they had separate companies. George was called MicroFX. He produced a few titles on his own those days. Pharaoh's Tomb was one of them. When George joined on to Apogee Software, his MicroFX titles were rolled into the Apogee product line. That's about all the backstory there is really to this. Even with the other freeware releases from us, this one is seriously old, so much that we don't even know how or when it was officially released. What? Wow. The best of our archival notes say unknown 1990, though the original MicroFX release would have been in the late 80s somewhere. And then there's some bullet points. We offer no support in getting this freeware running released. You are on your own here, in all caps. Don't ask us, you will be ignored. Smiley face. There's actually a smiley face in there. This game was released before Windows 2000, Windows XP for Vista. Get the game running, blah, 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 blah. They give a shout out to DOSBox, which is cool, which is exactly what I'm using. This game is released as freeware, not to be confused with public domain, abandonware, which is illegal, yada, 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 yada. Here we go. Traditionally in the past, when we have released freewares, we have gotten the original developer to say a few words about the release. This won't be the case with Tomb. When questioned about this, George's response was, quote, "There's only 6 people who will care about this," end quote. Winky face. Seriously, he was gracious enough to let the game re-release as freeware, but didn't have anything to say about it. We'd be remiss if I didn't mention the best thing about this game. To our knowledge, it's the only game in history available where the developer misspelled his own name. George spelled his name Broussard, there it is, in the title screen. What's more amusing about that is the final release of the game was 3.0, which means he updated it twice and still didn't fix it. Enjoy Pharaoh's Tomb, signed Apogee Software Limited, tech support March 2009. Okay, so now that we got all that boring history stuff out of the way, well, not boring, I find this stuff incredibly fascinating. I was so happy to find that buried within the game's files. So it's your classic platformer, kind of proto Commander Keen. Like I said, there's Amada Smith with his little hat, blah, 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 blah. Now, what makes this game so difficult, and you'll see I'm having a heck of a time. I actually cut out a lot of my failures. It's because this is the game that sort of introduced hitboxes to the world. I'm not sure of the technology that was used before this to have like hit detection and collision detection and whatever. But now around Nevada Smith, there is this gigantic bounding box. And you'll notice I was nowhere near those arrows. I was like a mile away. But the bounding box around me that dictates whether I get hit or not is so big that I can be within about 50 yards of a enemy or whatever, and that's it. I'm dead. Yeah, see, well, that was my fault. I held the jump button down. My bad. I'm so happy to have a gamepad that works with DOS games. I got a little bit jump happy. He also made a sequel to this game, sort of, kinda, called Arctic Adventure, which I've never played, but I looked up a couple photos of it, and it looks pretty much exactly like Pharaoh's Tomb. I don't really see much of a difference myself. So, it's a point-based kind of dealy. You got your lives down there, the skulls, which I think are artifacts, I think. You can find different artifacts. When we get to the end, you got your 3 little mens down there. And what's cool is that when you get an extra life, it literally says you get an extra man. Like they call them little mens. You get extra mens, which I thought was just flippin' adorable. The hardest part in the game when I was playing this when I was a kid was that you have limited information. Nevada did not think about bringing a gun or anything to defend himself with, because like you're going into the catacombs of Egypt. It's like, what are you going to find? A couple spiders, maybe a scorpion or 2? You don't need a gun for that. No. You've got massive, gigantic spiders and mummies and all kinds of stuff. And traps. Oh my God, the traps. The enemies in this game you don't even care about. It's the traps. Like this room is just trap happy. There's spikes on the floor. There's spikes on the bottom of these platforms. There's stuff shooting at you from the side. It's crazy. But you have kind of a safe little valley here because the little pistons that push you up, you know, you're fine. So it's not as hard, but it does teach you the value of patience because I am a very impatient gamer. I'm the worst. So the fact that I have to wait for these little dewdrop jobbers to come up, or if I have to wait for my window of opportunity, I'm awful at it. I'm terrible at it. So this one is my anathema. And I think this is about where I gave up and just like, you know what, let's just talk about the end of the game, whatever. And I gotta be honest with you, even when I was younger, these types of platforming games didn't really appeal to me. Oh God, okay, that was a vicious mistake, but I think I get out of this one. No, I don't, because the hitboxes, you're flipping hit me. I gave up. I was much more for like the adventure and text-based adventure games. So here's all the ordering information. So each chapter rather has 20 levels. That's 20, 40, 60, 80 levels in total, and countless dangers. Oh, this one actually gives you reasons why you should register. So you get the missing volumes of Pharaoh's Tomb, complete the adventures, secret codes. There it is, infinite men. I love it. Spears, let's just skip to any level. Get a map and a hint sheet, which is kind of cool. The current version, which I still bet has your name misspelled in it. And there it is. So they're $10 a chapter. This one's called Raiders of the Lost Tomb. So it costs $10, $40 total, $25 if you get them all. Now, this also mentions getting the game on bulletin boards and user groups and such, but doesn't make any specific mention to software creations, which was like the major BBS of the day. So maybe it was sort of before that its advent, but it was in the 80s, so it was kind of before the major proliferation of the internet, so the accessibility would be fairly limited. that's pretty much all there is to say about Pharaoh's Tomb. It was one of my very first DOS games, my very first platformer, and I played it on a PC right now probably bigger than my bed. So thank you, George Broussard. Thank you for this and also helping to form Apogee and by extension 3D Realms, etc., etc. You guys did a lot of good. So thank you for joining me on the ShareWarehouse. We'll dig in a little bit deeper next time. And as always, good night, jelly beans. Good night.